This happened during one of the busiest stretches of my year. June is always packed for us. Quarterly reporting, client calls, budget reviews. I'm a company manager for a small environmental consulting firm based out of Olympia, Washington, which means I'm either in meetings, catching up on email, or stress walking in circles around my office while trying to squeeze another hour out of the day. That week, I barely went home. Left early, got back late. Mostly takeout and bad sleep. The kind of week where the dishes pile up, laundry waits, and your bed just becomes another surface to drop your bag on. My apartment's a small one-bedroom, third floor, kind of old but cozy enough. I chose to stay here because I'm trying to save up for my dream house. This place isn't perfect, but it's cheap, and it's helped me stay focused on my goal. Quiet building, too. I've lived there almost 4 years. Neighbors mostly keep to themselves. Nothing strange ever really happens here, or at least it didn't. The first thing I noticed was the milk. Not missing, exactly. Just less. I'd opened the fridge Thursday night after getting home late and remember thinking, did I really use this much for cereal? But I shrugged it off. Chalked it up to being exhausted. Memory's not sharp when you're burning out. You start assuming it's just you misremembering. Next, the blinds. I'm weird about light. I always angle the living room blinds downward at night so no one can see in. That's just how I've always done it. But Saturday morning, when I was walking out the door, I noticed they were tilted upward. Just slightly. Not all of them. Just the 3 on the far right. Just enough that you'd have to be right up against the window to adjust them like that. Again, I told myself I probably bumped them. Or maybe opened them too fast the day before. It didn't click yet. By Sunday, I had the place to myself again. Finally a slow day. I did a deep clean, vacuumed, wiped down the kitchen, changed my sheets, took a long shower, just to feel like a person again. I remember it clearly because it was the first time in over a week I didn't feel like I was carrying a backpack full of bricks. After the shower, I went to brush my teeth. And then I noticed something that still gives me chills. My toothbrush was wet, like freshly used wet. The bristles were pushed outward too, not the way they look when they dry normally. It didn't just look wet, it looked worked over. Splayed. Bent. Not the shape it was in that morning. I picked it up, stared at it, then smelled it. Mint. Someone had just brushed their teeth with it. I live alone. I put the toothbrush down slowly, backed out of the bathroom, and did a full walk through the apartment. Every door locked. Nothing looked moved or out of place. No sign of forced entry. No open drawers. No muddy footprints. Everything looked normal, except I knew it wasn't. I even started wondering if I'd maybe used it and forgotten. Stress does that, right? Maybe I brushed before the shower and spaced it, but deep down I knew I hadn't. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every little odd thing from the week. The milk, the blinds, now this. Was someone coming in when I was gone? Did I leave a door unlocked? Did someone have a key I didn't know about? The next morning, I called the property manager. Asked if any maintenance work had been scheduled recently. She said no, not in my unit. But then I remembered, 3 weeks back, I had a leak under the sink. Maintenance guy came by, fixed it in like 10 minutes. I didn't watch him the whole time. Could he have made a copy of the key? It felt like a stretch, but what else made sense? I had this creeping feeling that someone had been letting themselves in, not stealing. Not vandalizing. Just there. Quiet. Kind of living in my house while I wasn't there. That same afternoon, I stopped at Best Buy and picked up a basic indoor security camera. Nothing fancy, just something motion activated with cloud storage. I installed it high on the hallway shelf between the kitchen and bathroom, pointed right at the living room entrance. That night, I tried to sleep, kept waking up and checking the app. No movement, nothing out of the ordinary. Same the next night, and the next. Then came Wednesday. I had a meeting that ran long and didn't get home until close to 11. Ate cold leftovers, skipped my usual shower. Before going to bed, I checked the footage, and I stopped breathing halfway through the clip. Around 9:48 p.m., motion triggered the hallway camera. A figure emerged from the far end of the hallway, near the floor vent, crawl space. At first, I couldn't process what I was looking at. This person, male, short hair, wearing a hoodie, pushed open the small door to the crawl space at floor level. He slid out quietly like he'd done it a dozen times. Then he stood up, stretched, looked around casually like it was his own place, like this was part of his routine. Then he walked straight into the bathroom. I skipped ahead. He came out brushing his teeth with my toothbrush. Then he looked at the living room window, walked back to the crawl space, and slipped inside. Gone. I replayed the clip over and over. I couldn't stop shaking. My ears were ringing, and I kept telling myself I had to act, but my limbs weren't listening. I didn't know what to do. Call the cops, obviously, but what would they even find? He wasn't there now, and I had no idea who he was. I called 911, told them everything. An officer came out, watched the clip with me, then called for backup. They opened the crawl space. It was empty. No one inside. But they found signs of living: an old blanket, a flashlight, and a small plastic bag of toiletries, toothpaste, a razor, my spare deodorant, and some clothes I didn't recognize. I felt sick. The officers checked the entire building. No one saw anyone strange coming or going. No one heard noises, and no one knew how long he'd been using that space. Weeks? Months? The worst part? My bathroom's only 10 feet from where he was sleeping. I got a hotel for a few nights while the landlord brought in contractors to seal off the crawl space permanently. I changed all the locks, upgraded the camera system, and now I check footage daily. I even got a second camera for the bedroom, just to be safe. I replaced the toothbrush, obviously, but I still can't leave it in the bathroom. I keep it in a drawer in my bedroom now. I keep the bathroom door shut too. Every time I brush my teeth now, I look at the mirror and check behind me, just in case. No one was arrested. No one identified. The cops said it was likely a homeless man who found a quiet place to hide. Maybe he wasn't dangerous. Maybe he just needed shelter. But I still think about that first night I noticed the milk. That probably wasn't the first night he was there. And it might not have been the last time he watched me sleep. I was just doing regular stuff that night. Folding laundry, watching YouTube videos from my phone, and organizing some tools on the dining table I'd meant to put away for over a week. Nothing exciting. I live in Albany, New York, and by November, the nights get dark fast. I remember checking the clock at 7:38 p.m. and thinking it felt more like midnight. Cold air from the old windows, quiet street. One of those nights that just felt still. Nothing out of the ordinary, but that's probably what makes it worse in hindsight. I live alone in a small 2-story townhouse near the end of a cul-de-sac. It's an older place, built in the late 70s, but it's solid. I'm a web developer, which means I work from home and spend an unreasonable amount of time noticing tiny things. Bad alignment, strange spacing, weird patterns. It makes me overanalyze everything. And yeah, I'll admit I get a little paranoid sometimes. I like control, and when something's out of place, I tend to notice. So when the power cut out, My first instinct was to roll my eyes and blame the energy company. Every winter, without fail, they seemed caught off guard. Like the cold and everyone switching on their heaters was some kind of surprise. I figured they'd let the grid buckle again. But then I noticed something strange. Through the front window, I could still see my neighbor's porch light. Across the street, their TV was flickering behind the curtains. I stepped onto the front porch. Every house on the block still had power. It was just me. That's when the unease crept in. I stood outside for a minute, pretending I was just taking a break, but really I was watching, listening. No blown transformer, no downed wires, just me in the dark, like someone had singled my house out. Back inside, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and made my way to the basement. My flashlight beam caught the hanging string for the light bulb overhead, which of course didn't work. My basement's unfinished, just concrete, old wood, and the smell of time. That earthy, dusty smell that clings to the air. I stepped carefully, avoiding the loose board near the furnace. I found the breaker box and opened it. The main switch was flipped. Not tripped. Flipped. As in, someone had to push it down manually. That stopped me cold. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, trying to remember if I'd done it myself earlier for some reason. But there was no reason, and I'd been using power all evening. I flipped it back on. The house came back to life. The fridge kicked on upstairs. The dryer beeped. Lights came back. I waited there in the dark basement another moment, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I climbed back up, trying to be logical about it. Maybe there was a surge and the switch just fell? But that doesn't happen. You don't get an entire main breaker flipped manually by accident. When I stepped into the kitchen, I stopped again. The light was on. I had definitely turned it off when I went downstairs. I'm sure of it because I remember flicking the switch as I grabbed the flashlight. And something else. The tools I'd been organizing on the dining table, they weren't in the same spot. The screwdriver I'd placed next to the measuring tape was now lying sideways, closer to the edge. One of the zip ties had been uncoiled. My drill, which had been unplugged, now had the cord stretched out slightly like someone had picked it up and set it back down. My body locked up. I kept looking around. Everything in me screamed that something was off. It felt like walking into a room right after someone else had left. I checked the front door. Still locked. The back door, locked too. Windows, all shut. But still, the feeling sat in my gut like a weight. I didn't hear anyone, but that didn't mean no one had been there. Or worse, wasn't still there. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I didn't want to be dramatic, but I explained everything just like it happened. The lights, the breaker, the kitchen light turning on. The operator told me to stay on the line and lock myself somewhere safe until officers arrived. I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom. No windows big enough to crawl through. Just one door. I stayed there, holding my phone, still on the line, trying to listen for any sounds from inside the house. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No doors opening or closing. But that didn't comfort me. I kept thinking about how quiet it had been, about the light turning on, about the tools. Someone had been in my house. I just hadn't seen them. When the officers arrived, they did a full sweep. Every room, every closet, even the attic. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. The lock on the back door worked fine. The only thing they could confirm was that the breaker had indeed been flipped. They asked if anyone else had access to the house. I said no. No spare keys missing. No one I was seeing at the time. No friends over recently. They gave me the usual advice: install cameras, maybe change the locks, stay alert, and then they left. The house felt even quieter after that. The next morning, I went to Home Depot and bought a set of security cameras, motion lights, and new deadbolts. I even picked up one of those little alarms that screeches if a window is opened. Paranoia? Maybe. But after that night, I figured better paranoid than sorry. Later that week, I reviewed the footage obsessively, hoping to find something, anything, a shadow, a flicker, a clue. But there was nothing. Not a single oddity. Nothing to validate what I felt that night. It's not what the cameras show, it's what they missed. Whoever was there, if someone was there, came and went without leaving a trace. And they did it while I was home. Now every night, I check the cameras. I double lock every door. I unplug tools when I'm not using them. And sometimes I still catch myself walking through the house, pausing, looking over my shoulder, just to make sure things are where I left them. Because that night showed me something. It doesn't take much to turn a place you trust into a question mark. And some questions, I still don't have answers. This happened 8 years ago. I was 16, finally old enough, according to my parents, to stay home alone while they went out of town for a weekend wedding. They left that Friday morning and wouldn't be back until Sunday afternoon. I remember feeling weirdly excited about it. Like, yeah, the house was mine for 2 nights. No curfew, no being told to turn the Xbox off, no reminders to do chores, just me, the fridge, and the internet. Friday went exactly how you'd expect. I ordered pizza, played games, and stayed up way too late. I watched movies I probably shouldn't have, drank too much soda, and fell asleep with my laptop still playing something. It felt like freedom, in the best kind of way. That teenage kind of freedom where nothing can touch you because you still think the world works the way it's supposed to. It wasn't until around 1:30 in the morning that I finally shut everything down and headed upstairs. The house was quiet and the AC was humming like usual. I double-checked the front door, the back door, even the little side door that leads out to the trash bins. All locked. I even slid one of those rubber wedges under the back door. My dad always used them, and I figured it couldn't hurt. Then I climbed into bed, left a small light on in the hallway, and fell asleep. I don't remember exactly what woke me up, just that I was out cold until sometime after 3 a.m., and then suddenly, not. I remember blinking at the ceiling and realizing something felt off, like I just knew. Something had changed. Then a soft flash of light passed across my bedroom wall. That kind of flicker you get from motion sensor lights. I sat up and looked at my phone. 3:17 a.m. The light went off a few seconds later. At first, I figured it was a raccoon or a cat. We live in a pretty quiet neighborhood in Lubbock, mostly families and retirees. Nothing ever really happens. Still, I got out of bed and crept over to the window, careful not to make any noise. I peeked through the blinds. Nothing. Just our yard and the neighbor's patio, completely still. The wind wasn't even moving the trees. I went to the bathroom, got some water, and climbed back into bed. I told myself to stop being paranoid. About 15 minutes later, the light came on again. This time, I moved slower. I crouched low and crawled to the window, keeping the blinds mostly shut as I angled them just enough to see through. Still no movement. But I got that feeling, you know when your skin just goes tight and you don't know why? Like your body knows something before your brain catches up. Then I heard a knock. It was soft. From downstairs. I couldn't tell if it was the back door or the side door by the garage. But it wasn't loud or rushed. Just one, very quiet knock. I held still, straining to hear more. Nothing. Then another knock. A little louder. Still no voice. No doorbell. Just knocking. like someone testing how much noise they could make without drawing attention. I backed away from the window, grabbed my phone, and started pacing in my room. I opened the home security app, but my parents had only installed cameras out front and in the garage. Not helpful. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. I nearly dropped my phone. It came from the side door. Someone was testing it. It was weird how calm the sounds were. I crouched low, turned off all the lights, and crawled to the top of the stairs to listen. Every creak felt like an explosion under my feet. I didn't want to go down. I didn't want to be seen. Instead, I tiptoed back to my room, shut the door quietly, locked it, and slid my desk chair against the handle. Then I sat in the corner with a baseball bat my uncle gave me last Christmas, thinking it was some kind of funny joke. The motion light clicked on again. I didn't want to look, but I did. This time, I saw him, a figure pacing along the back fence, slow, back and forth. Turn, walk, turn, walk. Not in a rush and not hiding. Every once in a while, he'd stop and face the house, like he was waiting, judging something. Then he stepped directly beneath my window and looked straight up, just standing still, staring. I dropped to the floor instantly and backed into the corner again. That's when I finally called 911. I whispered everything. My name, my address, that I was alone, that someone was outside, checking doors and watching the house. The dispatcher asked my age. When I said 16, her voice got gentler. She told me to stay put, to stay quiet, and to keep the line open. I remember her saying, "You're doing good. Just breathe. They're on their way." I don't know how long I waited, but every second felt like it stretched. I kept thinking I'd hear a window break or footsteps on the stairs. I imagined him slipping inside somehow, walking up to my door, waiting there. When the flashing red and blue lights finally painted the ceiling, I didn't move. Not until the dispatcher said my name again and told me the officers were calling out for me. I ran to the window and peeked out. 2 squad cars. 1 officer on the megaphone. I bolted downstairs and opened the front door. The officers were calm but thorough. They checked the entire yard, all the windows, even looked up in the trees and behind the shed. No one was found. But then they started pointing things out. Footprints all around the house, not just near the doors, in the flower beds by the kitchen, in the dirt under the living room window, behind the trash bins. He'd circled the entire house, methodically. One of the officers said, "Looks like someone was testing entry points." Another said, "Maybe he thought the house was empty." But that didn't feel right to me. He looked straight up at my window, like he knew, like he wanted me to see him. I didn't sleep the rest of the weekend. I kept every light on. I dragged a dresser in front of my door. I even turned the TV on low just so the silence wouldn't drive me nuts. My parents got home Sunday afternoon. I told them everything. My dad didn't say much. He just looked angry. My mom cried and hugged me too tight. They installed new cameras that week. Full coverage now. Doorbell camera, backdoor camera, even a sensor by the fence line. But none of that really matters when it's 3 a.m. and the motion light clicks on. Because now I know what it means. And for a long time, some part of me still expected to see him there. Just standing beneath my window, watching, waiting. I live alone with my cat Lila in a 1-story house in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's one of those old bungalows with creaky floors, baseboard heating, and radiators that hiss in the winter like they're tired of keeping up. It's a peaceful neighborhood, mostly retirees and quiet couples who tend their gardens and wave as they walk their dogs. I've always liked the stillness. It suits my personality. I work from home, so I spend long stretches of time alone inside the house. Over time, you start to memorize the rhythm of your home, the way it groans after sunset, the click the fridge makes when the compressor shuts off, the faint hum of electricity in the walls. That's probably why I didn't think much of it at first. It started around mid-August of 2022. We were in the middle of a heat wave, the kind that turns your front porch into a skillet and makes iced coffee feel like medicine. Lila began acting off. She'd sit near the floor vents and paw at them, not in her usual playful way, but slow, repetitive, like she was trying to coax something out. She'd sit and stare for minutes at a time. At first, I assumed bugs. This house is old. Mice, spiders, weird clicking beetles. It's part of the charm, right? But the way she did it, it was different. No pouncing, no tail flicking, just focus, like she was waiting. Then I started hearing things, shuffling sounds. Dragging, maybe, but muffled like it was coming from under my feet. Sometimes I'd hear it in the late afternoon while making lunch. Other times it would happen while I was in Zoom meetings, and I'd think maybe it was someone moving around outside. I tried to play it cool, probably just the house doing its thing. But then I realized something wasn't adding up. Lila stopped sleeping in her usual spots. Sunlight on the bed, the windowsill above the couch. Instead, she started sleeping in the hallway, specifically next to the vent near the bathroom. She'd curl up in a tight ball with her ears perked up and her nose pressed toward the floor. I started leaving a nightlight on because something about her new behavior made me uneasy. She wasn't relaxed. She was alert. One night I woke up at 2:30 a.m. to get water. I passed the hallway vent and heard something that made me stop in my tracks. It was the faintest sound, like someone exhaling, a long, steady breath. Then came a scrape, not loud, but very real. It sounded like something or someone quietly moving in place. I stood there, my bare feet stuck to the cool tile. The house felt heavier. I don't know how else to describe it, like the air had thickened. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, crouched beside the vent, and shined the beam through the slats. Nothing. The next morning, after debating with myself for half an hour, I decided it was time to check the crawl space. I'd never been down there. The access panel was inside the hallway closet, partially covered by storage bins and old boxes. I moved everything aside, unscrewed the panel, and pulled it away. The air that came out was stale and humid, like wet drywall and dust. I could already see bits of shredded insulation dangling like spider webs. I lowered my flashlight and stuck my head in. It was tight. You couldn't stand, barely enough room to sit upright. I got down on my hands and knees and crawled inside, sweeping the beam of the flashlight across the dirt floor. There were pipes overhead, thick spider webs in the corners, and insulation that looked decades old. I didn't expect to find anything. But about 10 feet in, I saw something that made me stop. A blanket. Folded. Not tossed or abandoned. Neatly placed. Beside it was a plastic bag with empty food wrappers, a crumpled McDonald's bag, a bottle of generic water, and something else. A phone charger. Just the cord, but it was plugged into an extension cord that disappeared into a crack in the wall, which meant someone had been using electricity from inside my house. My heart thudded, not in the dramatic movie way, but like I suddenly became very aware of it. I slowly backed out, making sure not to touch anything. Once I was clear of the hatch, I slammed the closet door, locked it, and went straight to my phone. The police came about 15 minutes later. 2 officers, one younger, one older. I showed them the closet, and both of them went down with stronger lights and gloves. When they came back up, the older officer told me I wasn't imagining anything. He pointed out footprints I hadn't noticed, bare ones and some in old, worn shoes. They searched the whole property. Every fence line, the alley, the shed. No one was there. The theory was that the person had been slipping in during the day, maybe while I was out running errands. They might have had tools, or maybe they were already inside before I moved in and just never left. The idea that someone had been down there under my home for who knows how long, watching, listening, charging their phone using my outlets, it freaked me out. The next day, I paid to get every vent covered and sealed. I bought cameras, one for the living room, one in the hallway, another facing the closet hatch. I even replaced the locks. Lila stopped sleeping by the hallway vent after that. She went back to the couch, to the sunny spot in the bedroom, like she knew it was over. But for me, it wasn't. Every time I heard a creak or something shifted on a shelf, I'd pause. If the floor popped in the middle of the night, I'd sit up and stare at the hallway until I convinced myself it was nothing. I started leaving the TV on just for background noise. Silence felt oppressive. I watched the camera footage obsessively the first few nights. Nothing. Just the flickering shadows and Lila's occasional midnight stroll. I couldn't shake the idea that whoever it was hadn't left because they were done. They left because I noticed. And that terrifies me more than anything. The police never found out who it was. There were no reports of break-ins, no follow-ups. Just a report filed and a warning to be cautious. It was treated like a fluke. One of those strange urban stories you hear on a podcast or buried in a subreddit. But I lived it. And if Lila hadn't been acting strange, if I hadn't decided to check the crawl space that morning, I might have gone months without ever knowing. Sleeping, showering, living my life above someone who didn't belong there. Every now and then, I'll sit in bed and stare at the hallway closet. I keep it locked now, always. But the thought still comes back. What if there's another way in I haven't found? What if they're waiting to come back? And what if next time they don't stay hidden? If these stories made you check your locks twice, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next stories, and comment what gave you chills tonight. Click now to watch 4 very scary home invasion horror stories, because sometimes they do get inside. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.